Safety checks of tower blocks across England and Wales have uncovered hundreds of faulty or missing fire prevention measures, which could cost leaseholders billions of pounds to repair. Flat owners have looked for evidence of unsafe cladding in the wake of the Grenfell tower fire in 2017, which killed 72 people. Inspections of newer apartment blocks have found major fire risks, even in those buildings that pass cladding inspections. Well, I can talk now to Ritu Saha, who's a leaseholder and co-founder of the UK Cladding Action Group. Ritu, thank you very much for joining us. So tell us about the block where you live to begin. Inspections were going on to check the cladding, I understand, and then other fire safety issues were uncovered.
Yes, that's right. When we were checking the cladding, we also did internal safety inspections, and it was found that we had what's called internal compartmentation issues, such as a lack of fire breaks, which are necessary to prevent fire moving from one flat to another inside the building.
So the cladding on your block is okay, but then these other dangers have emerged?
No, for my building, the cladding is also a danger.
Also a problem?
Yes. But there are several buildings across the country where cladding is actually fine, but there are a host of internal fire safety issues, such as the missing fire barriers, which are going to cost millions of pounds to fix. Sometimes the bills are much higher than the cladding bills themselves.
We'll come on to the money in just a minute. So how many people live in your block?
57 families.
57 families. And
yes.
How are you feeling about living there at the moment with these risks that have been, uncovered?
Well, these risks were uncovered 3 years ago, and we are still trying to fix them. In the middle of the pandemic, we've been living in this dangerous building 24/7. So it is a very, very scary time for us because, if God forbid a fire breaks out, we are always worried about how quickly we can escape, what is going to happen to our elderly neighbors, to neighbors with babies. It's an extremely anxious time.
And how much money would it cost to fix all these problems? Have you got a figure?
I consider myself relatively lucky when compared to many thousands of people, that our internal fire safety issues will probably cost about £200,000. On top of that, we have a cladding bill of over £2 million. But as I said, in many buildings, the issues are far worse, and those internal defects will cost millions.
So who is paying or going to pay or needs to pay those sorts of costs?
So there is no government funding for any internal fire safety defects that are discovered. So the only people who are paying are the innocent victims of this crisis who are living in these buildings, like me, who have been told that we either have to find these millions of pounds required to pay, or we face homelessness and eviction from our properties.
I can only imagine that not everyone can afford to make a payment towards that.
That is absolutely correct. I mean, these are huge, life-changing sums of money, and they need to be paid all up front. So there is no way that most families will be able to find, the tens of thousands of pounds that are being required, and especially also in the middle of the pandemic when many people are losing their jobs, becoming furloughed. So it's an incredibly difficult and precarious financial position that all of us are in.
So if not everyone can afford to pay, can any progress be made on organising work?
You're absolutely right. No progress can be made because the fewer, people can afford to pay, the bill will fall on those who were able to pay, and their bill basically becomes larger. So, and until, as I said, all the money comes up front, no work can start. So we essentially have a situation where these buildings are continuing to remain unsafe because, unfortunately, the government is not helping out with this, even though they say that these buildings are dangerous with these fire safety defects inside.
So you're all stuck in limbo, effectively. And especially so throughout the pandemic, as you've pointed out. What is your message to the government today?
My message to the government today is that it's been over 3.5 years since the Grenfell tragedy. The government has changed the rules retrospectively to say that all these buildings must be made safe. But it is fine to say such a thing, but the reality is that this will require huge financial expenditure. And till date, no action has been taken against the construction industry that has caused this crisis of building safety. So I want the government to understand that this is a question of human safety. Please put our lives first, put up the money up front to make these buildings safe, and then go against the construction industry and raise the money back from them via levies. Please consider our safety. It's high time.
Do you think it's in any way fair or realistic to expect people who are leaseholders to bear these costs?
Absolutely not. We bought these properties in good faith because we expected that the laws of the land would keep us and our families safe. And we have been let down and betrayed. I have more protection as a consumer if I go and buy a sandwich which poisons me than I have, having bought a flat with doing all the safety checks when I bought it, only to find out that it is now, unfortunately, a fire trap. And that needs to definitely change, and it is extremely unrealistic, unfair, and unjust, and against British principles of fairness and justness of society to expect the victims of the building safety crisis to pay to bail out the construction industry and the regulators that caused this crisis.
And in the meantime then, what's happening with regards to fire safety patrols, fire wardens? Are some of you as residents in your block and in other blocks that you're working with, are you having to do these patrols?
Well, yes. So, for example, in my block, the 57 families have already paid more than £500,000 just for a fire warden patrol. And in order to keep the costs down, my neighbors and I have done fire patrols ourselves. In fact, I remember on Christmas Day in 2018, my husband and I patrolled our building for 12 hours just so that we could keep the costs down, because getting somebody from outside would have, cost overtime, etc., and we just wanted to keep the cost down. That is how we spent Christmas 2 years ago.
Ritu, thank you very much for telling us your story. Ritu Saha, leaseholder and co-founder of the UK Cladding Action Group. And we've had a statement from the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government, a spokesperson saying our priority is making sure residents are safe and feel safe in their homes. That's why we're changing the law with the biggest improvements to building safety for 40 years. Building owners are responsible for ensuring their buildings are safe, and residents should speak to their building owner if they're concerned if a building contains a hazard or the measures in place don't sufficiently mitigate the risk to life from a fire. Both fire and rescue authorities and councils are responsible for enforcement and can take action.